I'd like to share with you a very interesting conversation that I had with a set of new clients. It's my hope that what I share with them is a help to you the way it was to them. He is 37, a medical doctor. She is 38, an attorney. They've been dating for 2 years. They came to me. He first noticed me on social media and my work, shared my videos with her. She reached out to me. He didn't even know it. She reached out and then let him know later that that they were going to do a session with me. And so she said on the call, she said, "Doc, I'm coming to you because, we've been dating for 2 years. He's an incredible man." He's on the call. He's an incredible man. And he's really been the best boyfriend I've ever had. And we've been talking about marriage and things are going really well. But we've got one issue. He wasn't saying anything. So what's the issue? She said, "Well, I want a prenup." I said, "Really?" She said, "Yes, sir. Why are you surprised?" I said, not to paint a general broad brush on any group or any demographic of people or gender or anything like that. I said, but typically when I have these calls, it's the man that wants the prenup and the woman doesn't really care. I said, again, it's not a one size fits all type of thing, but that's just what I've seen a lot of. She was like, "I can see that." She said, "But no, I want a prenup. I want to marry him. I love him. I believe in him. I believe he believes in me. But Doc, I'm very mindful of the divorce rates. And both of us are doing well for one another, with one another, or for ourselves. And we think we will do well with one another. But I've got to have some protection in case this doesn't work." Now, he's just sitting there looking, lets her talk about that. And then finally he says, "Doc, can I say something?" I said, "Of course." He said, "Doc, I love this woman. I love her. I have, I've made great money already so far in my career. I'm making more money. She's making great money. I'm a young medical doctor. Things are going well. I've got assets. I've got everything that I need. There's nothing of hers that I want if this doesn't work, even if we accumulate things together." And I can't get her to understand that because we are both already successful, a prenup really doesn't have much value. And more than that, I'm of the belief, and this is him talking, that my love should be enough. She listened. She said, "I understand that, Doc, but I just know the divorce rate is high and I've got to have some protection so that as a woman, I'm not left high and dry." I said, "I respect both of your opinions." I said, "But let me ask you a question." I said, "Do you all both love one another?" He started laughing and said, "Yeah, Doc, we watched that video. We know the difference between love and care." I started laughing. I said, "So you all both know that love is a choice, correct?" They both agreed. I said, "Well, here's the problem. Somebody doesn't love the other person." And they both kind of looked at me weird. I said, "Let me explain." I said, I think it was 2021, a year after the pandemic hit. And they were starting to open up the world. I wanted to go skydiving for my birthday. I said, "Have either of you gone skydiving?" They said, "No, sir." So I wanted to go skydiving. And I remember doing some research on it. And I was kind of a nervous wreck. I saw some stats where I think it was like 1 out of every 2,000 or 3,000 parachutes don't open, whatever. And, people obviously die. I read that stuff. And so, I said, I was making sure my insurance was paid up. My kids were taken care of. They were laughing. I said, because I didn't know how this was going to turn out, but I wanted to try it. I wanted to do something different. And I remember going through the instruction where they take you through these series of things. They have like makeshift plane board things that you stand in. They teach you how to have the proper posture, what to do when you jump out, how to put your arms behind your head and your legs back as far as you can. And all of those things. And you meet your tandem instructor. I said, "Do you know what a tandem instructor is?" They said, "The person that rides with you." I said, "Exactly." I said, "Most people didn't know, and I didn't know this skydiving. I thought I did it by myself." A lot of people don't know that when you skydive for the first time, you have to do tandem jumping, which means somebody gets on your back who is an instructor. They're strapped to you, and it's their job to pull the parachute and to do all of those things. Correct? They both said, "Yes, sir." I said, but what was funny is we were walking over to the airplane, and I had been suited up, and my tandem jumper had been suited up. It's about 8 or 9 of us jumping, and so each person had an instructor. So it's about, anywhere from 16 to 18 people on the plane, sitting person to person. But we were walking over, and I noticed they did not put a parachute on my back. And so here we are getting ready to get on the plane, and the plane thing is turning, so it's loud. And I reached back to my instructor and said, "Hey, where's my parachute?" He started laughing. I said, "Hey, bro, this ain't the time to laugh." I said, "Where's my parachute?" He looked at me and said, "I'm your parachute." It's okay. Got on. Everybody else was getting on. I got on. It was our time to jump. We got to the edge. He He said 3, 2, and I thought he was going to wait till 1. He pushed me at 2. Caught me off guard. I put my hands behind my back, my legs behind me, as far back as I could go. And we floated to the ground. I said, but when I looked at the video, I noticed something that they didn't tell me. I looked at the video from my GoPro, and as soon as we got off the plane, he released the parachute. They're listening to me intently. He released a parachute, an initial parachute, waited, and then released another parachute. I said, wow. Or they said, wow. I said, so he had 2 parachutes. I said, do you know why? They said, well, very likely to just make sure that everything catches. Something catches and you make it to the ground. I said, exactly. I said, but did you hear the part of the story where I said I had to learn how to jump and put my hands behind my head and my feet back as far back as front from me as I could? Did you hear that part? They both said yes. I said, do you want to know why they wanted me to have my hands behind my head and my feet back as far as possible? I said, do you all have any understanding of that? He, with a smile on his face, said, because the person who's jumping out of the plane, who has a person on their back who is skilled at jumping, has to trust the skill of the person that they're attached to. I said, you, sir, are smart. I said, the only people that want a prenup are 2 people that don't love one another. She was flabbergasted. You could tell. She looked at me and she just started shaking her head and closing her eyes. And I let her. I said, ma'am, you don't have to agree. I said, but the fact of the matter is, if 2 people really love one another, then they recognize that their love for one another is the parachutes. And here's the problem with modern day marriage. People want prenups because they don't want to own the fact that maybe, just maybe, you might marry the wrong person. And if you marry the wrong person, or a person who doesn't want to grow, who doesn't want to change, who doesn't want to develop, who doesn't want to go to therapy, who doesn't want to go to counseling, who doesn't want to go to coaching, who doesn't want to better their lives, now you're stuck with a spouse that you end up divorcing, and now you're in court trying to figure out assets. I said, but true love says, I respect the other person so much that I'm willing to be vulnerable, put my hands behind my back, and float through this thing in the air called life, and trust that love is the parachute that will keep us together. But watch, if the marriage doesn't work, that those parachutes called love are so strong that if we have to split up and go our separate ways, that she can love me enough to make sure that I'm taken care of, and that the man can love the woman enough to make sure that she's taken care of. She said, wow, Doc, I never looked at it that way. He's just smiling. I said, this man loves you, and we know he loves you because of the choice he's willing to make. And that choice is, hey, I'm going to jump out of this plane and float through the air, through life in this thing called marriage. And I'm going to put you on my back and trust that you're going to pull the parachute and that we're going to make it together. But in the event that it's a rocky jump, in the event that we end off floating somewhere off in the trees, I told them a story about how one of the people that jumped 2 planes before I jumped, the instructor and this person ended up over in the tree somewhere. He completely miscalculated where he was supposed to go, but they had parachutes. They still landed and they were okay. I said, being married to someone that you really love is like that. It doesn't mean it's going to work. Number one, because you can't control the actions of grown people. I said, both of you could come through this or coming into this session today very clear-minded that you want to be with one another. 5 years later, you could be in the marriage and say, I don't want this. And there's nothing that either one of you can do to stop the other person from feeling that way. It may take divine intervention. I don't know. I said, but if you really love one another and you're married to someone and they decide they don't want to be with you anymore, you can love them enough to make sure that they're taken care of, that the assets are fair, that the children are taken care of, that your spouse is taken care of, and vice versa. I said, we would put courts out of business if people jumped out of a plane with parachutes on their back called love. I said, ma'am, if you really love him, you don't need a parachute, a prenup. All you need is a parachute, and that parachute is called love. I hope this makes sense. If it did, type church in the comments with 3 R's. And then remember, you've got 2 jobs. 1, be better today than what you were yesterday. And 2, don't forget what I told you. What's up, everybody? This is Dr. Zeb. Listen, I've been dying to make this announcement for a very long time now, and I'm pleased to say that Inspire Nation has officially launched. Yes, we finally got a Facebook and YouTube community group where we're going to have exclusive content, exclusive shorts, exclusive discussion prompts, where we're going to engage with other people literally around the world who are on the same healing journey that we're on. I need you to go find these pages right now on Facebook and YouTube. Inspire Nation, follow the page, join the group, introduce yourself, and be prepared to link up with literally thousands of people around the world who are on the same healing journey, who are looking for the same resources, and who want to also be surrounded with other like-minded individuals who are growing in the same direction as you are. I'm so excited about this because it's the beginning of some great things I can't talk about right now. Listen, you got two jobs. One, be better today than what you were yesterday. And two, don't forget what I told you.